Okay, good morning, everyone. Today is September 18th, 2025. This is a regularly scheduled session of the Baltimore County Board of Appeals. We're here this morning for a public deliberation in the matter involving Freedom 40 Farms LLC, located at 9043 Old Court Road. It's case number 24-243-X. I'm Joseph Evans. Also here for this matter is William Paulshock and Fred Lauer. The petitioner is seeking a special exception, though originally for a commercial campground at the beginning of the hearing, which we had on it was that July 30th, I believe. At the beginning of that hearing, the petitioner orally modified his request from a commercial campground to 4 campsites that he indicated would be used by friends and family who simply wanted to be at the property for recreational purposes, and would not be a commercial campground in that he wouldn't be charging fees for the use of the campsites. So that still requires a special exception. And so the matter proceeded on that basis. The People's Council participated as it does, and it was opposed to the request. And there were a number of people who lived on the road, or the right-of-way, I guess, but just by way of context. There is a right-of-way off of Old Court Road. All of these properties have an Old Court Road address, but there's a right-of-way off this off Old Court Road, and the subject property lies at the very end of this right-of-way. And the families who live on the right-of-way were all opposed to the request. And there are any number of reasons, but I think the primary reason for the residents' opposition has to do with the nature of this right-of-way, which is unpaved, narrow, winding, subject to washouts in bad weather, and is one lane, 1.5 lanes at spots. Well, it's difficult for vehicles to pass each other going in opposite directions, so no, does obviously happen. So that's the kind of the context, and so it's up to us to decide whether or not Mr. Kratz, who is the live face of the petitioner and is the legal owner of the property, whether he has met his burden of proof with regard to the entitlement to a special exception for this use. So I think that's the background. I think that's the context. Does anyone have anything to add to that, just by way of background, so we know where we're going?
No, I think you've done a good job, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so I wanted to, before we actually begin the deliberation, I wanted to say that I think I injected a non-issue into the case myself by asking the parties to consider whether a variance was actually the appropriate vehicle here. And I think I was just I mean, I suppose there is a basis by which one could have sought a variance for this, but that doesn't foreclose seeking a special exception, so I don't really know what I was thinking, frankly. I think it was probably vaguely stupid on my part, but nonetheless, Mr. Kratz did not seek a variance. He can't now seek a variance, even if it were to apply by reason of res judicata. So it's really a non-issue, and I don't think we even actually really need to consider it. And I apologize to basically to Mr. Gorski and to Ms. Jollycourt and the People's Council for generating a little bit of extra work that probably was unnecessary. So, having gotten that apology out of the way, let's turn to the merits if we can. Does anyone wish to start? Anyone want to jump in? I can give you my initial views, subject to whatever anyone else has to say. I did not think that the petitioner met his burden of proof, frankly. The site plan was vague. The circumstances were vague. The notion of these 4 campsites, which would be hooked up actually to nothing, but would function with an extension cord from the house and people running to the house to use the facilities, struck me as peculiar and vague, and I thought that I just wasn't, I guess I wasn't really I wasn't really I wasn't really convinced about that. I know that there's been, hovering in the background, there's been a lot of contention between the residents of the right of way, or the people living on the right of way, and Mr. Kratz. And I must say, I think that having these campsites would probably exacerbate that contention. There was some discussion about approving the request with limitations. Petitioner didn't suggest in his submission to the board, it didn't suggest any limitations, and I just don't know that it's our job to conjure up limitations that might make this work or not, and which would be, under any circumstances, extremely difficult to enforce, and which I think would probably generate a lot of people out there with video cameras trying to document stuff. And I know that from past experience that the Baltimore County citation process is difficult to invoke and rely on in situations where what's being sought to be enforced are limitations on special exceptions. It's difficult for the county to actually handle that in a way that's efficient. So my own view, and the Greater Patapsco Community Association weighed in on the fact that there are a number of these right-of-ways in this area of the county. I personally was not familiar with that. And so the use of these right-of-ways, I guess, is an issue that recurs. I mean, that isn't a reason in and of itself to deny the special exception request. I mean, if he's entitled to a special exception, he's entitled to a special exception regardless of the right of way. But I do respect the community association's notion that our decision here has consequences beyond, potentially has consequences beyond this case. Again, that isn't a deciding factor in my estimation, but it is something that means that we shouldn't sort of just kind of lightly take, lightly consider the subject. There are implications. My view is that under the Schultz v. Pritz and all that stuff, that the request for the campsite here, in point of fact, is different than it would be in other parts of the zone, zone, because of it would adversely affect the road, the right of way, whatever we call it, in a way that's not similar to how such a request would operate in another part of the zone. So, so the adverse impact here is different than it would be at other places. And I also think that I generally found the testimony of the residents to be credible. Personally, I would like there to be neighborhood peace. I always want there to be neighborhood peace. I've lived in a neighborhood without peace. It's very unhappy. So I hope that the neighbors and Mr. Kratz can come to can work things out so that they can all live together without antagonism. But in the meantime, I think that the request is too vague, too unusual, I guess, just not. And I don't really, as I say, I don't really credit everything that I heard about the nature of the property and what would go on there. So that's my view for what it's worth, but I'm happy to be convinced otherwise. So
very good, Mr. Chair. I find similar reasons in this request and very vague. The information that was important on the red line markup, the surveyor would not even put his name on it. And,
right.
It truly impacts really the welfare of the neighborhood. Bring in electric, not just the neighborhood, but the people staying, from the sanitation issues of drawing electric cords from the house to these sites. Everything was very vague, and I think it will be detrimental to everyone involved at this point, with not all these information being quite accurate and verified. So I agree with you exactly, Madam Chair. I find this not something that I would have to deny.
I also agree with both of you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Polshock. As you said, Mr. Chairman, I find that maybe the parties could work together and work this thing out, and unfortunate that they didn't. It seems as if Mr. Kratz is willing to make some changes as he came down from 20-some commercial spaces to 4 in the revised request before us. And perhaps in the future, they can work this out, but as it stands right now, the proposal, as you said, is vague. I think, I think the congestion in the roads, the closeness of the one house, and also not knowing, excuse me, not knowing how many or how often or what kind of perspective we have on this. You know, is it gonna be 3 times a year, 30 times a year? How many? We just don't have any perspective from the proposal that was before us to give us something solid to go with. So I think you've done a good job of outlining the special exception and why this is different and would create more of a burden than in another instance. So I would agree with both of you that we should deny the application here, the revised application.
Well, you raise a good point, actually, about not knowing what kind of volume we're talking about. Is it 4, is it 12, how many weeks, how many people, how much is involved here? We really have no idea. We have no idea, actually, what the level of use of these 4 campsites would be. And, without that information, and I mean, Mr. Lauer, that's just really a great point. I mean, without that information, I don't know how we can even begin to assess the impact that this request has on the neighborhood. I mean, we just don't know.
Agreed.
And it's up to the petitioner to tell us that. I mean, it's his burden of proof. So the absence of that information, well, I mean, that's just really goes right to the center of the whole matter. All right, well, so we've agreed unanimously to deny the request for the special exception. Once again, I want to echo what Mr. Lauer said. It is useful, it is better in the world for people to get along when they can. And so I would hope that everyone in the neighborhood can get along. But in the meantime, what the law requires is us to deny this application. And so what we do is what the law requires, and therefore it is our decision that the petition for a special exception will be denied. And a written opinion on this matter will be issued in due course. Any other matters that anyone has to bring up?
I do not. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lauer. Mr. Paulshock, everything good? Okay. All right, well then we are adjourned. Thank you all. And I thank council for their participation. They did actually, their submissions were excellent. So I want to thank everyone for that.